I called my daughter 3 times that morning, then my son. Straight to voicemail. No call back. No text. Nothing. I remember sitting there staring at my phone, wondering when I became so easy to ignore. But that same afternoon, something arrived in my mailbox that made my hands tremble. A formal invitation from the governor's office. They weren't just inviting me, they were honoring me at a state ceremony. And suddenly, the question that haunted me wasn't why my family ignored me. It was, what did they know about me that my own children didn't? If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to stay with me. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read your comments. And if this story touches something in your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. Not for me, but so stories like this can reach someone who needs them. I live in a small, quiet town in Ohio now. The kind of place where mornings are slow neighbors, wave from their porches, and nothing really changes unless you make it change yourself. My house isn't big, but it used to feel full. Now it just feels quiet. Too quiet. Most mornings, I wake up before the sun. It's a habit I never quite lost after all those years working night shifts as a nurse. I make myself a cup of coffee, sit by the kitchen window, and watch the same empty street every day. There was a time when that silence felt peaceful. Now, it feels like something missing. I still keep my phone close, always within reach, not because it rings often, but because I'm always hoping it will. My daughter Emily lives in Chicago. She has a good job, corporate something with marketing, I think. She's always been the smart one, organized, driven. The kind of woman who walks into a room and knows exactly where she belongs. My son Ryan stayed closer geographically, but somehow feels further away. He runs a small business construction remodeling, something like that. He used to call me all the time when he first started, asking for advice, asking for help. Now I hear about him through other people more than I hear from him directly. Every Sunday I try. It's almost a ritual at this point. I sit at the same chair after breakfast and I call Emily first. It usually goes to voicemail. "Hi, Mom. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." She never does. Then I call Ryan. Sometimes it rings longer. Sometimes he picks up, but it's rushed. "Hey, Mom. I'm on SID right now. Can I call you later?" "Hi, Mom. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." She never does. Then I call Ryan. Sometimes it rings longer. Sometimes he picks up, but it's rushed. "Hey, Mom. I'm on site right now. Can I call you later?" Later never comes. At first, I told myself it was just life. People get busy. Children grow up. That's what we want, isn't it, for them to build lives of their own? That's what I used to believe. But there's a difference between giving your children space and being completely shut out of their lives. And lately I've been feeling like I don't exist in theirs at all. I don't ask for much. I don't ask for money. I don't ask for visits. Sometimes all I want is 10 minutes on the phone. Just to hear their voices. Just to know I'm still part of something. There was one afternoon not long ago when I stared at my phone for almost an hour after calling them. I kept thinking maybe I dialed wrong. Maybe my phone wasn't working. Maybe there was some kind of mistake. So I checked the numbers again. Same numbers I've had saved for years. Same numbers I used to call when they were younger, when they actually needed me. I remember when Emily used to call me crying over a bad grade or a fight with a friend. I remember Ryan calling me late at night because he didn't know how to fix something, or because he just wanted to hear my voice before going to sleep. Back then, I never missed a call. Not once, no matter how tired I was, no matter how long my shift had been. If my phone rang, I answered. Because that's what mothers do. But somewhere along the way, things changed. And I didn't even notice when it happened. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was after I retired. Or maybe they just stopped needing me. And once they didn't need me anymore, and I didn't even notice when it happened. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was after I retired. Or maybe they just stopped needing me. And once they didn't need me anymore, they stopped remembering me. That's the thought that keeps me up at night. It's not anger. It's not even resentment. It's something quieter than that. Something heavier. It's the feeling of being forgotten. I try not to let it show. When neighbors ask about my kids, I smile. "Oh, they're doing great," I say. "Busy, you know how it is." And I laugh like it doesn't bother me. Like I'm not counting the days since the last time either of them called me first. Sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong. Did I push too hard when they were younger? Did I expect too much? Did I say something years ago that I don't even remember, but they never forgot? You replay things in your head when you're alone long enough. Every conversation, every argument, every moment you might have handled differently. But no matter how many times I go back, I can't find the exact moment when I lost them. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Not knowing, not having a reason, just silence. Cold, empty silence. Last week I tried something different. Instead of calling, I sent a message. Just a simple one. "I miss you. Call me when you can." I stared at the screen after sending it, watching, waiting. An hour passed, then 2. By the end of the day, still nothing. No reply, no acknowledgement, not even a seen notification. I told myself maybe they hadn't checked their phones, but deep down, I knew better. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the same one where I used to help them with homework, where we used to eat dinner together, where we used to laugh. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Because when you reach a certain age, you learn how to cry without making a sound. It's easier that way. No one hears you. No one asks questions. No one has to explain why they weren't there. I wiped my tears, poured myself another cup of coffee, cold by then, and told myself the same thing I always do. They're busy. They'll call eventually. You're overthinking. But the truth is, I was starting to feel like I didn't matter anymore. Like I had already been set aside. Like I was just a chapter in their past. And maybe that's why what happened next felt so unreal. Because just when I had accepted that my own family no longer had time for me, someone else did. Someone important. Someone who remembered me when my own children didn't. And I had no idea why. Not yet. There was a time when my life didn't feel empty at all. It felt overwhelming, full of noise, responsibility, exhaustion, and purpose. I wasn't always this quiet woman sitting alone in a small house in Ohio waiting for a phone that doesn't ring. I used to be needed, desperately needed. I started working as a nurse when I was 23. Back then, I still believed life would follow a simple plan: marriage, children, stability. And for a while, it did. Until it didn't. My husband left when Emily was 8 and Ryan was just 6. No warning. No explanation that made any real sense. Just a suitcase, a slammed door, and a silence that settled into the house like something permanent. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, both kids behind me holding onto my legs, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "Is Dad coming back?" I said yes, because I didn't know how to say no. But deep down, I already knew. From that moment on, everything changed. I wasn't just their mother anymore. I had to become everything: provider, protector, comfort, stability. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital almost immediately. Night shifts, double shifts, weekends, whatever they would give me. There were nights I didn't sleep at all. I'd work 12 hours, come home just long enough to get the kids ready for school, then collapse for 2 hours before going back again. Coffee became less of a drink and more of a lifeline. But I never complained, because every time I looked at Emily and Ryan, I reminded myself why I was doing it. Emily was always so bright. Even as a child, she had this way of focusing on things like the rest of the world didn't exist. I remember helping her with homework at the kitchen table. Her little brow furrowed in concentration, her pencil tapping lightly as she thought. Ryan was different, more sensitive. He needed reassurance in a way Emily didn't. He would come sit beside me late at night, even when he should have been asleep, just to make sure I was still there. "Mom," he would whisper, "you're not going anywhere, right?" And I would pull him close and say, "Never." I meant it. Every sacrifice I made willingly. There were things I gave up without even thinking twice. New clothes, not important. Vacations. We didn't need them. Sleep optional. But their future? That mattered. I saved every extra dollar I could. I remember clipping coupons comparing prices, stretching meals to last longer than they should. There were weeks when I ate less just so they could have more. They never knew. At least, I don't think they did. I made sure their lives felt as normal as possible. Birthdays still had cake, Christmas still had presents, school events still had a mother in the audience even if I had just come off a 12-hour shift and hadn't slept. I never missed anything important. Not Emily's graduation from high school. Not Ryan's first big school project presentation. Not the nights they needed someone to sit beside them when things felt too big, too confusing. I was always there, always. When Emily got into college, I cried harder than she did. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. So incredibly proud. She had worked hard. She had earned it. And I knew that all those years they meant something. But college wasn't cheap. Even with scholarships, there were costs. So I worked more. I took on overtime shifts that most people avoided. Holidays, late nights, double weekends. I remember once falling asleep in my car in the hospital parking lot because I was too tired to drive home safely. But I never told Emily that. I didn't want her to feel guilty. I wanted her to focus on her future. Ryan followed a different path. He wasn't the academic type, but he was determined in his own way. When he told me he wanted to start his own business, I didn't hesitate. I believed in him, even when others didn't. I used what little savings I had left to help him get started. It wasn't a lot, but it was everything I could give. I told him, "You build something for yourself, something no one can take away from you." And for a while, he did. He called me constantly in those early days. "Mom, what do I do about this? Mom, I don't think this is working. Mom, do you think I made a mistake?" And I was there for all of it, every doubt, every fear, every small victory. Those were the moments that made everything feel worth it. Every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, every quiet sacrifice. Because I wasn't just surviving. I was building something, a future for them, a life better than the one I had. And for a long time, I thought they understood that. I thought they remembered. But as the years passed, something shifted, gradually, almost too slowly to notice at first. Emily became more independent. Ryan became more distant. The calls became less frequent, the conversations shorter, and somewhere along the way, the urgency disappeared. They didn't need me the way they used to, and I told myself that was a good thing, that it meant I had done my job, that it meant they were strong enough to stand on their own. But I never imagined that not needing me would turn into not wanting me. That the same phone that used to ring with their voices would one day sit silent for days. That the same children I had built my entire life around would become strangers I wasn't sure how to reach anymore. Sometimes I sit in this quiet house and think about all those years, All those choices, all those sacrifices. And I ask myself a question I don't know how to answer. If I had known how things would turn out, would I have done anything differently? The truth is no, because I didn't give what I gave expecting something in return. I gave because I loved them, because they were my whole world, and maybe that's why it hurts so much now. Because when your whole world slowly drifts away from you, you don't just lose people, you lose a part of yourself. And I didn't even realize how much of myself I had given away until there was so little left. I didn't notice the distance at first. That's the thing about losing people slowly. It doesn't feel like a loss in the beginning. It feels like change. Small, harmless change. The kind you tell yourself is normal. After I retired, I thought things would finally be different. For the first time in decades, I had time. Real time. Time to visit. Time to talk. Time to be present in ways I never could when I was working double shifts and coming home half asleep. I imagined Sunday dinners again. Not every week, maybe, but often enough. I imagined visiting Emily in Chicago, helping her cook, sitting in her living room, talking about things that didn't revolve around stress or survival. I imagined stopping by Ryan's job sites, bringing him lunch like I used to when he first started watching him build something with his own hands. I thought maybe now we could finally be a family again. But I didn't realize that while I had been waiting for that moment, they had already moved on from it. The first time Emily snapped at me, it caught me completely off guard. I had called her on a Tuesday afternoon, nothing urgent. I just wanted to hear her voice. She answered, but her tone was tight. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something." "I know, sweetheart," I said quickly. "I just wanted to check in. Can we not do this right now?" She interrupted. I froze. Do what this? The constant checking in, the calling. It's a lot. A lot. The word echoed in my head long after the call ended. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I wasn't asking questions about her work. I wasn't interfering in her life. I just called. But to her, that was already too much. After that, I tried to space things out more. Instead of calling every few days, I waited a week. Then 2. But it didn't seem to make a difference. When she did answer, her responses were shorter. Colder. Like she was speaking to someone she felt obligated to tolerate, not someone she wanted to talk to. Ryan was different, but not better. With him, it wasn't frustration. It was avoidance. He didn't snap. He didn't argue. He just disappeared. I remember one afternoon I decided to surprise him. I drove over to one of his job sites. It wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes from my house. I had packed a small lunch, just like I used to years ago. Sandwiches, fruit, a bottle of iced tea, simple things, familiar things. When I got there, I saw him immediately. He was standing with 2 other men, dressed in clean work clothes, talking in a way that sounded simple things. Familiar things. When I got there, I saw him immediately. He was standing with 2 other men dressed in clean work clothes, talking in a way that sounded professional, confident, different. For a moment, I just stood there watching him. My son. My little boy who used to call me when he couldn't figure something out. He looked like someone else entirely. I walked toward him smiling. "Ryan." He turned, and for a split second, just a second, I saw something in his eyes. Surprise. Then something else. Something I couldn't quite place at first. It disappeared quickly. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "I thought I'd bring you lunch," I said, holding up the bag like it was something special. The men beside him glanced at each other. Ryan looked around, then stepped closer to me. "You didn't have to do that," he said. His tone wasn't warm. It wasn't angry either. It was uncomfortable. "I know," I said softly. I just thought, Mom, he interrupted. I'm kind of in the middle of something right now. I glanced at the men again. They were watching us now. Waiting. Judging. I could feel it. I won't stay long, I said quickly. Just wanted to drop this off. You can just leave it, he said, taking the bag from my hands. There was no smile. No thank you. Just a quick, polite exchange like I was a delivery person he didn't want to engage with. And then he turned back to his coworkers. Without introducing me, without acknowledging me, without anything, I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. I had imagined that moment so differently in my head. I thought he would smile, maybe even laugh. Mom, you didn't have to come all this way. Something like that. Something warm. Instead, I felt like I had stepped into a place where I didn't belong. Like I had crossed a line I didn't know existed. I walked back to my car slowly, carefully. Like moving too fast might make the feeling worse. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat in the driver's seat, staring at my hands, wondering why they suddenly felt so empty. After that day, I stopped trying to surprise him. I stopped trying to insert myself into his life, because it was clear I wasn't part of it the way I used to be. The distance between us didn't happen all at once. It built itself quietly, through missed calls, short conversations, awkward silences, unspoken boundaries. Until one day I realized something that felt almost impossible to accept. I was no longer someone they turned to. I was someone they managed, someone they kept at a distance, carefully, deliberately. And the hardest part, I didn't know how to fix it, because I didn't know exactly what I had done wrong. Emily thought I was too much. Ryan acted like I was too visible, too present in places I didn't belong. So I started pulling back. Calling less, asking less, expecting less. And in doing that, I thought maybe things would improve. That maybe they would come to me instead. That maybe they would notice the silence I left behind. But they didn't. The silence didn't bring them closer. It just made everything feel final. Like a door that had been slowly closing for years had finally clicked shut. And I was standing on the outside. Alone. Not because I didn't love them, not because I didn't try, but because somewhere along the way, they decided they didn't need me in the same way anymore. And I didn't know how to exist in their lives without being needed. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing unusual about the day at all. The morning started the same way most of my mornings do. Quiet, slow, predictable. I made my coffee, stood by the window, watched the same stretch of empty road. The sky was clear, the kind of calm that makes you believe nothing bad is about to happen. I remember thinking, maybe I'll call Emily later. Not right away. I didn't want to seem like too much again, so I told myself I'd wait until the afternoon. Give her space. That word again. Space. It's funny how something meant to sound healthy can feel so much like distance. Around noon, I decided to clean up a little. Nothing major, just small things around the house. I carried a basket of laundry down the hallway, moving slower than I used to, but steady enough. I've always been careful. After all those years in the hospital, you learn how fragile the body can be. You learn to pay attention. But sometimes, no matter how careful you are, things still happen. It was the rug. A small one near the hallway corner. I must have stepped on the edge wrong, or maybe it shifted slightly under my foot. I don't even remember the exact moment. Just the sudden feeling of losing balance. And then, the fall. Hard. Sharp. The kind that knocks the air out of your chest before you even understand what's happening. I hit the floor with a force that sent a jolt through my entire body. For a moment, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that hums in your ears like the world paused for just a second. I tried to breathe, tried to move. Pain shot through my hip, my side, my arm. Okay, I whispered to myself like I used to do with patients. You're okay. Just take it slow. I tried to push myself up, but my body didn't respond the way I expected. My arm trembled under the weight. My leg wouldn't hold. I sank back down the cold floor, pressing against my skin. That's when the fear started. Not panic, not yet. Just a quiet, creeping realization. I can't get up. I reached for my phone. It had fallen a few feet away from me, just out of reach. For a second, I considered crawling, but the pain stopped me before I even tried. So I lay there, still, listening to the ticking clock on the wall, counting seconds without meaning to. Eventually, I managed to stretch far enough to grab my phone. My hands were shaking. I didn't think. I just tapped Emily's name. The call rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. Hi, Mom. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. Her voice sounded so normal, so distant from where I was lying. Emily, I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me. Please. I hung up and immediately called again. Same result. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't want to sound desperate. Even then, I didn't want to be too much. So I called Ryan. The phone rang longer this time. Hope flickered for a second. Maybe he would pick up. Maybe this time. Voicemail. Hey, it's Ryan. Leave a message. I swallowed hard. Ryan, it's Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I fell. I think I need some help. Can you call me back? I hesitated before adding, please. I hung up and stared at the phone, waiting, listening. Every small sound in the house suddenly felt louder. The refrigerator humming, the faint creak of wood settling, the clock ticking. Minutes passed. Then more. I tried calling Emily again. No answer. Ryan. Nothing. I told myself they just hadn't seen it yet, that they were busy, that they would call back any second. I just had to wait. So I waited. Time stretched in a way I had never felt before. Each minute felt longer than it should. My body started to ache more as the adrenaline faded. The pain became sharper, clearer, more real. I shifted slightly, trying to find a position that didn't hurt as much. There wasn't one. I thought about calling 911. The idea crossed my mind more than once, but I hesitated. It felt too serious, too dramatic. What if it wasn't that bad? What if I was overreacting? What if Emily or Ryan called back in the next minute? So I waited a little longer. Just a little. The light outside the window began to change. The afternoon slipping slowly toward evening. Still no calls, no messages, no sign that anyone had even listened to my voicemail. That's when the panic finally set in. Not loud, not chaotic, just deep, heavy, the kind that settles in your chest and doesn't let you breathe properly. I realized something then. Something I had been trying not to see for a long time. If something really happened to me, if I needed them, they wouldn't be there. Not because they didn't care at all, but because I wasn't a priority anymore. And emergencies don't wait for priorities. Tears slipped down the side of my face, pooling quietly against the floor. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just lay there and cried. Because in that moment, it wasn't just about the fall. It wasn't just about the pain. It was about what the silence meant. Hours passed. I don't know how many exactly. Time stopped feeling real after a while. The sky outside darkened, the house grew colder, and I was till there, still waiting, until finally. I don't know how many exactly. Time stopped feeling real after a while. The sky outside darkened, the house grew colder, and I was still there, still waiting, until finally there was a knock at the door. Soft at first, then louder. Ms. Fairmont. It was Mr. Howard, my neighbor. I tried to call out, but my voice came out weak. In here? The door opened. Footsteps rushed in, and then his face appeared above me, concerned, startled. Oh my God, how long have you been down here? I don't know, I whispered. He didn't ask more questions, didn't hesitate. He called for help immediately. Within minutes, everything moved quickly. Paramedics, questions, lights, voices, hands lifting me carefully onto a stretcher. And as they carried me out of the house, I held onto my phone, still waiting, still hoping that it would ring, that one of them would call. That somehow I wasn't as alone as I felt, but it never did. Not once, not the entire time I was lying there on that floor, not when I needed them the most. And I think that was the moment something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly. In a way I knew would never fully go back to how it was before. The hospital smelled the same. Clean, sterile, familiar. It was a strange kind of comfort. After all those years working in a place just like this, you would think being back as a patient would feel unbearable. But it didn't. It felt quiet, like everything had slowed down just enough for me to think. Maybe too much. I stayed there for 2 days. Nothing was broken, thankfully. Just bruising some inflammation and a warning from the doctor about being more careful. As we get older, he said gently, these things can become more serious. I nodded. I already knew that. What I didn't say was that the fall itself wasn't the part that scared me the most. It was what came after. Or rather, what didn't. No calls, no messages, no sign that either Emily or Ryan had even listened to my voicemail. Not while I was lying on the floor. Not while I was in the ambulance. Not even while I was lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. At one point, I picked up my phone and checked again. Nothing. The silence felt louder in that room than it had in my house. The nurse came in a few times to check on me. She was kind, probably around the same age Emily had been when I first started working. Do you have someone we can call for you? The nurse came in a few times to check on me. She was kind, probably around the same age Emily had been when I first started working. Do you have someone we can call for you? She asked. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I said, no. I'm fine, because what was I supposed to say? Yes, I have 2 children, but they won't answer. It sounded worse out loud, so I kept it to myself. When I was discharged, Mr. Howard drove me home. He didn't say much during the ride, but before I got out of the car, he looked at me and said something I wasn't expecting. You shouldn't be alone like this. I forced a small smile. I'm used to it. He didn't smile back. That doesn't mean it's right. I didn't have an answer for that, so I thanked him and went inside. The house felt different when I walked in. Not physically. Nothing had changed, but something about me had. The hallway where I had fallen felt heavier, like it held the memory of what happened. I avoided looking at the rug. Instead, I moved slowly to the kitchen and sat down. For a long time, I just sat there. No TV, no radio, just silence. And then eventually, I stood up and checked the mailbox. I don't even know why. It wasn't like I was expecting anything important. Bills, maybe? Advertisements? The usual. But that day there was something else. A thick envelope. Cream-colored. Heavier than anything I usually received. At first, I almost didn't pay attention to it. I assumed it was some kind of promotional material. But then I saw the return address, and I froze. Office of the Governor. I stared at it for a long moment, convinced I had read it wrong. I turned the envelope over, read it again. Same words, same official seal printed in the corner. My name was typed clearly across the front. Jacqueline Fairmont. Not handwritten, not sloppy, precise, intentional. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not excitement. Not yet. Something closer to confusion. Why would the governor's office send me anything? There had to be a mistake. I looked around, half expecting someone to step out and tell me it had been delivered to the wrong house. But there was no one. Just me. And that envelope. I carried it inside slowly, like it might somehow disappear if I moved too fast. I set it on the kitchen table and just looked at it. For several minutes, I didn't open it right away. Part of me didn't want to, because as long as it was sealed, it could still be anything. A mistake. A coincidence. Something that didn't really involve me. But once I opened it, it would become real. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Finally, I sat down and slid my finger under the edge. Carefully. Slowly. The paper tore with a soft sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Inside was a single letter. Printed. Formal. Official. I unfolded it and began to read. Dear Ms. Fairmont, my eyes moved down this page, trying to make sense of the words. We are honored to invite you to attend a state ceremony recognizing individuals whose actions have made a significant impact. I blinked. Read the sentence again. Your presence is requested. Not optional, not random. Requested. In acknowledgement of your past service and contribution. My hands started to tremble slightly. Past service. Contribution? I read the entire letter twice, then a third time. Each time I expected to find something that would explain it, some detail that would reveal the mistake. But there was nothing. Everything was correct. My name, my address. Even the date of the event printed clearly at the bottom. It wasn't vague. It wasn't generic. It was specific, directed, intentional. I leaned back in my chair, the paper still in my hands. My mind raced through every possibility. Had I donated to something volunteered somewhere I forgot about, filled out a form years ago that somehow led to this? None of it made sense. I wasn't important. Not in that way. I had spent my life helping people, yes, but quietly. In hospital rooms, behind closed doors, not in ways that led to official recognition, not in ways that reached the governor's office. Or so I thought. I flipped the page over, checking for anything I might have missed. There was a phone number, an official contact line, and a name, a coordinator, someone I could call. My first instinct was to dismiss it, to assume it had been sent to the wrong person, to put it aside and forget about it. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the seal. maybe it was the way my name looked on that paper. Or maybe it was the timing. Because just days ago, I had been lying on the floor of my own home, calling the people who were supposed to care about me most. And no one answered. And now someone I had never met was asking for me, specifically, formally, as if I mattered. I picked up the phone again, the same phone that had stayed silent when I needed it. My fingers hovered over the numbers printed on the letter. I hesitated because I wasn't sure what I was about to find out. And sometimes not knowing feels safer than the truth. But eventually, I pressed the first digit, then the next. And as the phone began to ring, I realized something. Whatever this was, it wasn't random, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Curiosity. Real, undeniable curiosity. Because somewhere out there, someone remembered me, even if I didn't remember why. The phone rang longer than I expected. Each second stretched, echoing in the quiet kitchen like something important was about to happen or fall apart. For a moment, I almost hung up. It felt strange calling a number tied to something so official, so far removed from the life I had been living. A life where calls went unanswered, where silence had become the norm. But before I could pull the phone away, someone picked up. Office of the Governor. This is Claire speaking. How may I assist you? Her voice was calm, professional, warm in a way that felt practiced but not insincere. I hesitated. My throat suddenly felt dry. Hi, I stopped swallowing. My name is Jacqueline Fairmont. I received a letter today. There was a brief pause on the other end. Not long, but just enough to make my heart beat faster. Yes, Ms. Fairmont, she said, her tone shifting slightly, more focused now. Thank you for calling. We were actually hoping to hear from you. Hoping? The word caught me off guard. You were? I asked, unable to hide the surprise in my voice. Of course, she replied. We wanted to confirm your attendance for the ceremony. We understand this may come as unexpected. Unexpected. That was one way to put it. I think there might be some kind of mistake, I said carefully. I don't understand why I received this invitation. There was no hesitation in her response. There's no mistake, Ms. Fairmont. Her certainty sent a quiet ripple through me. None. I'm sorry, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I don't recall doing anything that would... You will, she interrupted gently. Or at least, we believe you might. That didn't make sense. What does that mean? I asked. Another brief pause. This one felt different. Measured. As if she was choosing her words carefully. There are certain details, she said, that will be formally presented during the ceremony itself. However, I can assure you, your recognition is based on a documented event. One that had a significant impact. A documented event. My mind searched through years of memories, faces, hospital rooms, late nights, emergency situations. There had been so many moments in my career where decisions had to be made quickly, where outcomes weren't always certain, but nothing that stood out as extraordinary. At least, not to me. I was a nurse, I said quietly, for over 30 years. I helped people, but that was my job. Yes, but nothing that stood out as extraordinary, at least, not to me. I was a nurse, I said quietly. For over 30 years, I helped people, but that was my job. Yes, Claire replied, and sometimes people go beyond their job in ways they don't fully realize. Her words lingered, unsettling in their calm certainty. I still think you might have the wrong person, I said again, though my voice was weaker this time. Less sure. Ms. Fairmont, she said, her tone softening slightly. We have verified your identity thoroughly. There is no confusion. My grip on the phone tightened. Verified? Thoroughly? You're certain, I asked. Completely. Silence settled between us for a moment. I didn't know what else to say. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand, being told to step forward without knowing what was below. What exactly will happen at this ceremony? I asked. You will be formally recognized by Governor Reeves, she said. There will be a presentation followed by remarks from the governor himself. My heart skipped. Governor Reeves? Yes, I had seen him on television before, in interviews, speeches, public appearances. He was confident, composed, the kind of man who seemed completely at ease in the spotlight. The idea that he would stand in front of a room and speak about me felt impossible. I don't think I'm the kind of person who belongs at something like that, I admitted. Claire didn't hesitate. With respect, Ms. Fairmont, that's exactly why you do. I didn't know how to respond to that. No one had spoken to me like that in a long time. Not with certainty. Not with respect that felt earned, rather than polite. Will there be other people like me? I asked. There will be several honorees, she said, each with their own story. Stories. Plural. That made it feel slightly less overwhelming. Slightly. And you're sure this isn't optional? I asked, surprising even myself with the question. She let out a soft breath, almost like a quiet smile. We would strongly encourage your attendance. Strongly encourage. Another careful phrase. I see, I said. Ms. Fairmont, she continued, I understand that this may feel sudden, but I want you to know this recognition is not random. Someone remembered what you did, and they made sure it wasn't forgotten. Someone. The word echoed in my mind. Who, I asked almost instinctively. There was a pause again, longer this time. I'm afraid that's something you'll hear directly at the ceremony, she said. Of course, they weren't going to tell me everything. Not yet. I understand, I said quietly. Would you like us to arrange transportation for you? She asked. We can provide assistance if needed. Transportation. Assistance. They were expecting me, planning for me. No, I said after a moment. I can manage. Very well, she replied. We will send you a confirmation email with all the details. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Thank you, Miss Fairmont, she said. We look forward to seeing you. The call ended. The silence that followed felt different from the silence I had grown used to. It wasn't empty. It was full of questions, full of something I couldn't quite name. I set the phone down, slowly staring at the letter still resting on the table. A documented event. Someone remembered. Recognition. Governor Reeves. The pieces didn't fit together. Not yet. I closed my eyes, trying to think. To go back. To find something, anything that might explain this. Faces came and went in my memory. Patients I had cared for. Moments of urgency. Decisions made under pressure. There were countless times I had done what needed to be done, but nothing that stood out as something worthy of this. Or maybe I had just never seen it that way. Because when you spend your life helping people, you don't stop to measure which moments mattered more. You just do what needs to be done and move on to the next. I opened my eyes and looked around the kitchen. The same quiet space, the same stillness, but something had shifted. Because for the first time in days, I wasn't thinking about who hadn't called me. I wasn't staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. Instead, I was thinking about something else, something ahead of me, something unknown. And strangely, that felt better. Not because I understood it, but because it reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. That maybe, just maybe, my life hadn't been as small or as invisible as it had started to feel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letter resting on my nightstand, like it was watching me waiting. Every time I closed my eyes, Claire's words echoed back. A documented event. Someone remembered. You might recall. Might. That word bothered me the most because it meant this wasn't something obvious. It wasn't something recent. It was something buried, something I had lived through and somehow forgotten. I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter around me, as if that could quiet my thoughts. But it didn't. Instead, memories began to surface. Not clearly at first, just fragments, faces without names, rooms without context, moments of urgency, flashes of bright hospital lights, voices overlapping, hands moving quickly. I had seen so much during those years. Too much sometimes. You learn as a nurse how to let things go. You have to. Because if you carry every moment with you, every patient, every outcome, you don't survive in that job. So you file things away. Push them into the background. Tell yourself they're just part of the work. Until one day, they disappear completely. Or so you think. Sometime past midnight, I gave up on trying to sleep. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the living room. The house was silent, the darkness wrapping around everything in a way that felt almost comforting. I turned on a small lamp and sat down in the chair by the window. For a long time, I just sat there, thinking, trying to force something to come back. But memory doesn't work that way. You can't command it. You can only wait for it to find you. And then, something shifted. Not a full memory, just a feeling. Sharp, urgent, different from the others. My breath caught slightly. I leaned forward, pressing my fingers together. Come on, I whispered to myself. And then it came. Not all at once, but enough. It was late. I remembered that first. Late enough that most of the hospital had quieted down, but not so late that emergencies stopped coming in. They never stopped. I had been on shift for hours already, tired, running on coffee and instinct, when the call came through. A child. Critical condition. Car accident. The details came back slowly like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was still holding. I could hear the voices again. ETA 2 minutes. Prepare trauma room. Where's the pediatric team? Everything moved quickly after that. Controlled chaos. The kind I had been trained for. The kind I had lived in for decades. But this one felt different. Even then, even in the moment. There was something about the urgency in the room, the way people spoke, the way they moved. When they brought the child in, everything sharpened. I could see it clearly now. Small. Too small. Injured. Fragile. The kind of sight that hits you in the chest before you can even process it. There had been so much happening at once. Doctors calling out instructions, machines beeping, hands working fast, precise. I had taken my place without thinking. That's what you do. You don't stop. You don't hesitate. You act. But something had gone wrong. I remembered that now. A moment, just a second, where things shifted. Where the plan didn't work the way it was supposed to. Where the room changed. The energy, the tension. I could feel it again. That sudden, sharp awareness that if something didn't happen right now, it would be too late. I had moved. I don't even remember deciding to, just reacting. Years of experience guiding me without conscious thought. There had been a complication, a blockage, a failure in something that should have worked. And for a moment, everyone hesitated. Just for a moment. But in situations like that, a moment is everything. I stepped in. I remember someone saying my name. Jacqueline, wait. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because I saw something they didn't. Or maybe I just acted faster. I did something that wasn't exactly standard. Not by the book, not the safest choice. But it was the only choice in that moment. The room felt like it held its breath. Time stretching. Everything narrowing down to that one action. That one decision. And then movement. A shift. The monitors changed. The sound in the room changed. From flat tension to something else. Relief. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. Enough to know that what I did had worked. I leaned back in the chair, my chest rising and falling faster now. I hadn't thought about that night in years. Not really. Not like this. I remembered the exhaustion afterward. The way I had gone home and collapsed into bed, too tired to even process what had happened. I remembered thinking, another shift, another case, nothing more. No follow-up, no recognition, just another moment in a long line of moments, or so I believed. But now I wasn't so sure. Because as the memory settled into place, something else came with it. A question. What happened to that child I never knew? In hospitals, you don't always get closure. Patients move, cases transfer. Life continues, and you move on to the next person who needs you. But what if? What if that moment didn't end the way I thought it did? What if it mattered more than I realized? I stood up slowly, my heart still beating faster than normal. The room felt different now. Not quiet in the same way as before. Not empty. Full. Full of something I had forgotten I carried. I looked down at my hands. Older now. Softer. Slower. But once they had moved without hesitation. Without fear. And maybe, just maybe, that was the moment they were talking about. That was the documented event. That was the reason. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. If that was true, then someone had remembered. Someone had followed that story further than I ever did. Someone had taken that moment and carried it forward. And now, all these years later, it was coming back to me. Not as something I had done for recognition. Not as something I had held on to. But as something that had quietly changed everything for someone else, and I hadn't even known. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, not happier, but steadier. For the first time in a long while, I woke up with something on my mind that wasn't loneliness. It was that memory, that night, that child. I moved slowly through my morning routine, but my thoughts stayed fixed on one thing. What really happened after that, I had spent years believing it was just another shift. Just another moment that passed through my hands and disappeared. But now, it felt like something unfinished. something waiting for me. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the letter still there in front of me. I read it again, in acknowledgement of your past service and contribution. That word felt heavier now, more specific, more real. I looked at the phone. The number Claire had called from was still there, saved, waiting. I hesitated, then I picked it up. This time, I didn't feel unsure. I felt determined. The phone rang twice before she answered. Office of the Governor. This is Claire. It's Jacqueline Fairmont, I said. Her tone warmed immediately. Miss Fairmont, I was hoping you might call again. I remembered something I said, skipping the small talk. There was a pause. Go on. There was a case. Years ago. A child. A car accident. Something went wrong during treatment, and I swallowed. I stepped in. I could hear her breathing, Sophine. I could hear her breathing softly on the other end. Listening. Carefully. I don't know the outcome, I admitted. I never followed up. But I think that might be what this is about. Lay on the other end. Listening. Carefully. I don't know the outcome, I admitted. I never followed up. But I think that might be what this is about. Another pause. But this time it felt different. Not cautious, not guarded. More like confirmation. Yes, she said quietly. That is part of it. Part. The word landed sharply. Part 1 repeated. There's more to the story, she said. But you're on the right path. My heart began to beat faster. Is the child alive? I asked. I didn't realize how much that question mattered to me until I said it out loud. There was a brief silence. Then, yes. The word hit me harder than I expected. Alive. After all these years, alive. I leaned back slightly, my chest tightening with something I couldn't quite name. Relief? Shock? Disbelief. I didn't know, I whispered. We know, Claire said gently. That's part of why this recognition matters. I closed my eyes for a moment. All those years. All those moments I thought had disappeared. And somewhere out there, one of them had kept going. I want to know what happened, I said. I understand, she replied. And you will. When, at the ceremony. Of course, they weren't going to tell me everything now. Not yet. But I can tell you this, she continued. The person you helped that night never forgot. A chill ran through me. Never, I asked softly. No. The certainty in her voice made it feel real in a way I wasn't prepared for. They tried to find you, she added. That made me sit up straighter. What do you mean? For years, she said. But records change, people move, names get lost. It wasn't easy. I tried to process that. Someone had been looking for me for years. I didn't even know they were looking, I said. They didn't give up, she replied. Those words stayed with me long after she said them. Didn't give up. I thought about Emily, about Ryan, about the unanswered calls, about the silence. And then I thought about a stranger, someone I didn't even remember properly, who had spent years trying to find me. The contrast was almost too much to hold. Who are they? I asked. You'll meet them soon, she said. Soon. That word felt close, real. Not distant like everything else had been. Ms. Fairmont, Claire added, There's something else you should know. I held my breath. This isn't just about what you did in that moment, she said. It's about what it became afterward. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? The impact didn't stop that night. Her words sent a ripple through me. Impact didn't stop. How far did it go? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. There was a pause. And then, further than you can imagine. I sat there completely still. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about a single decision, a single moment. It was about something bigger. Something that had grown without me even knowing. I don't understand, I admitted. You will, she said again. Always that same answer. You will. I let out a slow breath. Part of me wanted to push, to demand answers, but another part, a quieter part, knew that whatever this was, it deserved to be revealed the right way, at the right time. I'll be there, I said finally. I'm glad to hear that, she replied. The call ended shortly after that, but the silence that followed was no longer empty. It was filled with questions that felt alive. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. A child who survived, a stranger who searched for me, a story that didn't end where I thought it did, and something else, something deeper. Because for the first time, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, my life hadn't been as unnoticed as I believed. That maybe the quiet work I had done, the sacrifices, the choices had reached further than my own family ever saw, or cared to see. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. The same road, the same stillness. But I didn't feel the same, because now I wasn't waiting for a phone to ring. I wasn't hoping for someone to remember me. Instead, I was preparing to walk into a room where I would finally understand why someone never forgot, and why after all these years, my story was being brought back into the light. It started with a missed call. Not mine, theirs. I was standing in the kitchen rinsing a cup when my phone buzzed against the counter. The sound was sharp in the quiet room, unfamiliar in a way it hadn't been before. For a second, I just stared at it, because lately it hadn't been ringing at all. I dried my hands slowly before picking it up. Ryan. His name lit up the screen. I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement, not exactly. Something more cautious. Careful. Like I had learned not to expect too much from moments like this. Still, I answered. Hello, Mom. His voice came quickly, too quickly, urgent, different. Yes, I said, my tone steady. I'm here. There was a pause, a small one, but I could hear it, like he wasn't sure how to begin. He cleared his throat. I heard something today. Of course he did. The words didn't surprise me. Not really. News like that, it travels, especially when it's connected to someone unexpected. About what? I asked, though I already knew. The governor thing, he said, the words slightly rushed. Is that real? I leaned against the counter, folding one arm across my chest. Yes, I said simply. Another pause, longer this time. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. That question almost made me laugh. Not out loud, but inside. A quiet, bitter kind of irony. I tried to call you last week, I said calmly. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I was busy, he said quickly. Work's been, I know, I interrupted gently. You're always busy. That stopped him. I could feel it through the phone, the shift, because for once I wasn't the one trying to fill the silence. I wasn't rushing to make things easier for him. So what is it exactly? He asked after a moment, his voice softer now. More careful. It's a ceremony, I said. They're recognizing something I did years ago. What did you do? He pressed. I don't know the full story yet, I replied. They're going to explain it there? That doesn't make sense, he said, a hint of frustration creeping in. They invite you to something like that and don't even tell you why. I know part of it, I said quietly. A case. A child. From when I was working. He didn't respond right away. I imagined him standing somewhere, job site office, wherever he was trying to process it. You mean like at the hospital? He asked. Yes. Another silence. Then, that's kind of a big deal, Mom. The words hung in the air. Kind of a big deal. I thought about the years, the quiet work, the long nights, the sacrifices no one ever asked about. And now it was suddenly a big deal. I suppose it is, I said. There was something in my tone that made him hesitate again. Are you okay? He asked. That question caught me off guard, because it sounded almost genuine. I'm fine, I said. Emily told me you had a fall. He added quickly. Of course she did. So she did get my message, I said softly. Ryan didn't answer that. She was going to call you, he said instead. I closed my eyes for a moment. Going to. Almost. Eventually. Words that don't quite reach the moment they're supposed to. I'm okay, I repeated. You should have told us you were in the hospital, he said, his tone shifting again, this time defensive. I opened my eyes. I tried. Words that don't quite reach the moment they're supposed to. I'm okay, I repeated. You should have told us you were in the hospital, he said, his tone shifting again, this time defensive. I opened my eyes. I tried. That landed. I knew it did, because this time he didn't have anything to say. We stayed on the phone in silence for a few seconds. Then, Mom, he said slowly, Emily and I were thinking maybe we could come by, talk about all this, the ceremony, the recognition, the sudden importance, not the fall, not the missed calls, not the silence, just this. I thought about it, really thought about it, and for the first time, I didn't feel an immediate urge to say yes. I'll let you know, I said. He hesitated. You'll let me know, he repeated. Yes. Another silence, different this time, because now he was the one waiting, the one unsure. Okay, he said finally. Just let me know. I will. We hung up. I set the phone down slowly. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. But inside, something had changed. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing after them. I wasn't reaching. I wasn't trying to fix something they had already let go. I was still. And somehow, that felt stronger. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. Emily. I stared at her name for a moment longer than I had with Ryan. Then I answered. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice softer than usual. Hello, Emily. I heard about the invitation, she said. Why didn't you tell me? There it was again. The same question, different voice, same assumption. I called you, I said. A pause. I was in a meeting, she replied quickly. I know. Silence. Then I didn't realize it was something like this, she said. Something like this. Important. Worth her time. I didn't realize either. I said. That seemed to throw her off. Well, what is it exactly? She asked. I repeated the same explanation I gave Ryan. A ceremony. Recognition. A past case. She listened quietly. And when I finished, "That's incredible, Mom," she said. Incredible. The word felt foreign coming from her. "You must be proud," she added. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I felt yet. "I'm still processing it," I said. "That makes sense," she replied quickly. "But we should celebrate. Ryan and I were thinking we could come over." Of course they were. Now that there was something to celebrate, something visible, something impressive. I walked slowly to the window, looking out at the same empty road. "I'm not sure that's necessary," I said. There was a pause. A longer one. "Not necessary," she repeated. "I appreciate it," I added. "But I have a lot on my mind right now." That wasn't the answer she expected. I could hear it in her silence. "Mom, this is a big deal," she said. "I know. Then why wouldn't you want us there?" I turned, slightly resting my hand against the window frame. "Because when I needed you last week," I said softly, "you weren't." The words landed, heavier than anything I had said before, and for a moment neither of us spoke. "I didn't know it was that serious," she said quietly. I did. Another silence. This one, different. Not defensive, not rushed, just real. "I'm sorry," she said. The words were soft, careful, but they came, and for the first time I believed she meant them. But something inside me didn't move the way it used to. Didn't rush to forgive. Didn't immediately close the distance. "I hear you," I said, and that was all. No more, no less. We ended the call not long after that, and when the house fell quiet again, it didn't feel empty, because now something else had taken its place. Not loneliness, not hope. Something stronger, clarity. Because for the first time, I could see the difference between being remembered and being needed. And I was no longer willing to confuse the two. The days leading up to the ceremony felt unfamiliar. Not because anything dramatic was happening on the outside, but because something inside me had shifted, and I could feel it in the smallest moments. The way I moved through the house, the way I looked at myself in the mirror, the way I thought about the past and the future. For years, my days had blended into one another. Quiet, predictable, almost invisible. But now, there was something ahead of me, a fixed point, a moment that hadn't happened yet, but already felt significant. And that kind of anticipation does something to a person. I stood in front of my closet longer than I care to admit, not because I had so many options, but because I didn't. Most of my clothes were practical, comfortable, the kind you wear when you don't expect to be seen. But this was different. A state ceremony, recognition, a room full of people who would be watching. I ran my fingers along the hangers, slowly pausing. When I reached a dress I hadn't worn in years. Navy blue. Simple. Elegant in a quiet way. I pulled it out carefully, holding it up against myself. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Not because she looked different, but because of the way she was standing. Straighter. More certain, like she was remembering something about herself that had been forgotten. I let out a small breath. "Well," I murmured softly, "this will have to do." I laid the dress out on the bed and stepped back. It wasn't about the clothes, really. It was about what they represented. showing up, being seen, allowing myself to take up space in a way I hadn't in a long time. Later that afternoon, there was another knock at the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Mr. Howard. He stood there with the same calm presence he always carried, but this time there was something else in his expression. Curiosity. "Well," he said, offering a small smile. "I hear you're becoming quite important." I couldn't help but smile back. "I wouldn't go that far." He stepped inside, glancing around as if checking everything was in order. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better," I said. "Much better." He nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I'd hate to think the governor's invitation would go to waste." I let out a quiet laugh. "Word travels fast around here, doesn't it?" "Faster than you'd think," he replied. We sat down in the living room, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me more seriously. "You going?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. That seemed to please him. "Good," he said. "You should." I hesitated for a second. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." I looked down at my hands, then back up at him. "Do you think it's strange?" I asked. "That something I did so long ago is coming back now?" He leaned back slightly, considering the question. "No," he said after a moment. "I think what's strange is how often things like that don't come back." That made me pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he continued, "people do meaningful things all the time. Quiet things, important things, and most of them go unnoticed." He looked at me steadily. "But that doesn't make them any less real." His words settled into me, because that was exactly how I had lived my life, doing what needed to be done without expecting recognition, without expecting anything, really. But this time, he added someone noticed. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "They did, and that matters," he said. We sat in silence for a moment after that. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. "You nervous?" he asked suddenly. I considered the question. "Yes," I admitted. "Good," he said. I blinked slightly. "Good means it matters to you," he replied. I let out a soft breath. He wasn't wrong. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. The dress was laid out, my shoes beside it, everything ready. But I wasn't. Not completely. Because it wasn't just about showing up. It was about facing something. A past I hadn't fully understood. A moment that had grown into something bigger than I ever imagined. And something else. I picked up my phone and stared at it for a long time. Ryan's name, Emily's name. Still there, still familiar, but no longer the center of everything. I thought about calling them, letting them know the details, inviting them, including them in this moment. The old version of me would have done it without hesitation, would have reached out, tried to bring them closer. But now I wasn't so sure. Because this moment, it wasn't about proving anything to them. It wasn't about making them proud. It wasn't about being seen through their eyes. It was about something else entirely. Something I was just beginning to understand. So instead of calling them, I set the phone down. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. The morning of the ceremony arrived quietly. Sunlight filtered through the windows, soft and steady. I woke up early even before the alarm, not out of anxiety, but anticipation. I moved slowly, deliberately. Every action felt intentional. Every step carried weight. When I put on the dress, I paused for a moment, looking at myself fully. for a moment, looking at myself fully, really looking. And what I saw wasn't just a woman preparing for an event. It was someone who had lived a life, who had given more than she realized, who had been overlooked but not forgotten. And that, really looking. And what I saw wasn't just a woman preparing for an event. It was someone who had lived a life, who had given more than she realized, who had been overlooked but not forgotten. And that changed everything. I took a deep breath, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. Before I stepped out, I paused, just for a second, looking back at the house, the quiet, the stillness, the place where I had felt so invisible for so long. And then I stepped outside. Because whatever was waiting for me, it wasn't back there. It was ahead. And for the first time in years, I was ready to meet it. The building was larger than I expected. Tall columns framed the entrance polished stone, reflecting the morning light in a way that made everything feel important, official. As I stepped out of the car, I paused for just a second looking up at it. For a moment, I felt out of place, like I had wandered into a scene that belonged to someone else. Someone more accomplished. Someone more visible. But then I remembered Claire's voice. You belong here. I took a slow breath and walked forward. Inside, everything was quiet, but not empty. There were people everywhere. Men and women dressed in formal attire, moving with purpose, speaking in low, measured tones. Some held folders, others small cards or programs. Everything felt organized, controlled, intentional. A woman approached me almost immediately. "Ms. Fairmont?" she asked with a polite smile. "Yes," I replied. "Welcome," she said. "We're so glad you're here." She handed me a small card with my name printed neatly across it. Jacqueline Fairmont. Seeing it there in that setting made something shift in my chest again. "Please, follow me," she said. I walked beside her through a long hallway lined with framed photographs, past ceremonies, past honorees, moments frozen in time. People who had stood where I was now. People who had done something worth remembering. And somehow, I was among them. We reached a large room already partially filled. Rows of chairs faced a stage at the front. A podium stood under soft lighting. Flags positioned neatly behind it. Everything was ready, waiting. "You'll be seated here," the woman said, guiding me to a row near the front. Near the front, not in the back, not hidden, seen. I sat down slowly, smoothing my dress without thinking. Other people began to take their seats around me. Some glanced my way. Polite smiles, quiet nods. No one knew me, and yet we were all there for the same reason. Recognition. I clasped my hands together, resting them in my lap. My heart was beating a little faster now, not from fear, but from anticipation, because whatever was about to happen, it was real. A few minutes later, I heard my name, Jacqueline. I turned, and there she was, Emily, standing just a few steps behind me, Ryan beside her. I froze for a moment, not expecting them, not here. "I didn't know you were coming," I said. Emily gave a small, tentative smile. "We found out the time and location," she said. "We wanted to be here. Wanted." The word felt careful, measured. Ryan stepped forward slightly. "You didn't think we'd miss something like this, did you?" I looked at him, then at Emily, and for a moment, wanted. The word felt careful, measured. Ryan stepped forward slightly. You didn't think we'd miss something like this, did you? I looked at him, then at Emily, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. Part of me was surprised, another part cautious. But there was something else, too. Something quieter. Something that felt like distance. I didn't know what you would do, I said honestly. Emily nodded slightly, as if she understood more than I said. Can we sit with you? She asked. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I nodded. Yes. They took the seats beside me. Close, but not as close as we used to be. And somehow, can we sit with you? She asked. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I nodded. Yes. They took the seats beside me. Close, but not as close as we used to be, and somehow that felt right. We sat there in silence for a few moments. Not uncomfortable, just aware. I'm glad you're okay, Emily said softly. I am, I replied. Ryan shifted slightly in his seat. This is really something, Mom, he said. I mean, the governor. I gave a small nod. Yes. There wasn't much else to say, because words didn't quite capture what this was, or what it meant. The room gradually filled. Conversations quieted. And then, the lights dimmed slightly. A subtle signal. The ceremony was about to begin. A man stepped up to the podium. Introductions were made. Formal. Structured. Everything moving with a quiet sense of importance. I listened, but only partially, because my mind kept drifting. Back to that night, that child, that moment, and forward to whatever was about to be revealed. One by one, names were called. People walked up to the stage, stories were shared, some brief, some more detailed, acts of service, moments of courage, decisions that changed lives. Each one met with applause, respect, recognition. I felt something build inside me with each story, a mixture of admiration and something else, a growing awareness that I was part of this, that my story was about to be told in the same way. My hands tightened slightly in my lap. I became more aware of Emily beside me, of Ryan on my other side, of their presence, their attention. Something that had been missing now suddenly here, but different. Because this time, I wasn't the one seeking it. I wasn't the one waiting for it. It had come on its own. Finally, the man at the podium paused. He glanced down at his notes, then looked up. And now, he said, we come to our next honoree. My breath slowed. Everything around me seemed to quiet. Even the small movements, the shifting of chairs, the soft rustle of fabric. All the way from a life of quiet service, he continued. This individual exemplifies what it means to act without expectation and to change lives without ever seeking recognition. I felt my heartbeat in my chest. Louder now, stronger. Jacqueline Fairmont. My name. Spoken clearly, formally, carried across the room. For a moment, I didn't move, because hearing it like that, in that space, made everything real in a way I wasn't prepared for. Emily's hand touched mine gently. Ryan leaned slightly forward. Go on, Mom, he whispered. I stood up slowly. Every movement felt deliberate, measured, like stepping into something I had been moving toward without knowing. And as I walked toward the stage, I realized something. This moment, it wasn't just about what I had done. It was about what had been carried forward, what had grown, what had been remembered. And now, I was about to find out just how far it had gone. The walk to the stage felt longer than it actually was. Each step echoed softly beneath my shoes, the sound almost louder than the quiet room around me. I could feel every eye following me, not judging, not questioning, just watching, waiting. I reached the steps and paused for a fraction of a second before climbing them. One step, then another, and then I was there, on the stage, in the light. For a moment, I didn't look at the audience. I couldn't. Instead, I focused on the man standing just a few feet away from me. Governor Reeves. Up close, he looked different from how I had seen him on television. Less distant, more human. But there was something else in his expression, something I hadn't expected. Emotion. Real emotion. He stepped forward slowly, and before anyone said a word, he reached out and took my hands. Warm. Steady. "Miss Fairmont," he said softly. "Not into the microphone. Not for the audience. Just for me." "Thank you." The words were simple, but the way he said them made them feel heavier than anything that had been said all day. I looked at him, searching his face, trying to understand, trying to connect this man to a memory that was still incomplete. He turned slightly, guiding me to stand beside him. Then he faced the audience, and everything changed. "Today," he began, his voice now strong, clear, filling the room. "We honor someone who spent her life doing what many consider ordinary, but who, in one extraordinary moment, changed the course of a life forever." I felt my breath catch. The room was completely still. No movement, no sound, just his voice. "More than 20 years ago," he continued, "a young boy was brought into a hospital after a severe accident." My heart began to pound. The memory, the child. "It was a critical situation," he said. "Complicated, uncertain, and in that moment when hesitation could have meant the end, someone made a decision. I felt it all rushing back. The urgency, the pressure, the risk. They acted," he said. "Not because it was safe, not because it was expected, but because it was necessary." The room seemed to shrink around me, everything narrowing to his words. That decision saved a life. A pause, and then that life was mine. The world stopped. Not literally, but everything inside me did. My breath, my thoughts, my sense of time, gone, replaced by one overwhelming realization. Him. It was him. Governor Reeves turned toward me again, his expression open now, no longer controlled by formality. "You were there," he said quietly, his voice no longer just for the audience. "You made the choice that no one else was ready to make." My hands trembled slightly in his. I didn't know," I whispered. "I know," he said. He released one of my hands and stepped back slightly, turning again to the audience. "For years," he continued, "I was told that my survival came down to a moment. A single moment where someone refused to give up. I could hear Emily's breath beside me, Ryan shifting in his seat, but I couldn't look at them. I couldn't look anywhere except at him. "I didn't know her name," he said. "Not at first. Records were incomplete. People moved. Time passed." His voice softened slightly, but I never forgot. The words hit me deeper than anything else. Never forgot. Because when you're given a second chance at life, he continued, you carry that with you. Every day, every decision, every step forward. He paused again, looking directly at me, and I spent years trying to find the person who gave me that chance. My vision blurred slightly. Not from confusion, from something else, something overwhelming. And today, he said, his voice steady again, I finally have the privilege of saying thank you face to face. The room erupted into applause, but it sounded distant, muted, like it was happening somewhere far away. Because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the room, not the audience, not even the ceremony. Just that truth, that connection, that realization. I had saved him, not just any patient, not just another case. Him and everything that came after, everything he had become, every life he had touched. It all traced back to that one moment, that one decision. That night, he continued once the room quieted again. You didn't just save a life. You created a future. A future. The word echoed in my mind. A future that allowed me to serve, to lead, to make decisions that impact thousands of people. I felt something break open inside me, not painfully, not sharply, but deeply. Your actions didn't end in that hospital room, he said. They carried forward into everything that followed. I closed my eyes for just a second, because suddenly, everything made sense. The letter, the ceremony, the years of searching, this moment. It wasn't about recognition, not really. It was about connection, about the unseen impact of a single choice. Jacqueline Fairmont, he said, turning fully toward me again, on behalf of this state, and on behalf of a life you changed forever, thank you. He stepped forward again and wrapped his arms around me, and this time I didn't hesitate. I held on. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. That my life, my work, my quiet, unnoticed years, they had mattered more than I ever knew. The applause filled the room again, louder this time, stronger. But inside me, everything was calm, steady, whole. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen. Not by my family, not by the world, but by the truth of what I had done and what it had become. The applause followed me as I stepped down from the stage, but it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt distant, soft, like something happening around me, not inside me, because inside me, everything was quiet, clear. I returned to my seat, slowly aware of every step, every breath. Emily stood as I approached, her eyes wide, filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not just pride, not just surprise, something deeper, something closer to realization. Mom, she whispered as I sat down. Ryan didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing something he had never fully seen before. He started then stopped. He shook his head slightly. I didn't know, he finished. I nodded once, neither did I. The rest of the ceremony continued, but I barely registered it, because beside me I could feel it. The shift, the weight of everything that had just been revealed, not just to the room, but to them, to my children. When it ended, people began to stand, to move, to talk. The room filled with voices again. But before I could even fully rise from my seat, Emily reached for my hand. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Ryan nodded beside her. "Please, Mom." I looked at both of them for a long moment, and then I stood. "Yes," I said. Then I stood. "Yes," I said. We moved to a quieter corner of the room away from the crowd. The noise softened behind us, replaced by something more intimate, more real. Emily spoke first. I don't even know where to start," she admitted. Ryan let out a breath. "Yeah." Quieter corner of the room, away from the crowd. The noise softened behind us, replaced by something more intimate, more real. Emily spoke first. I don't even know where to start," she admitted. Ryan let out a breath. "Yeah, same. I didn't rush them. I didn't fill the silence. I waited, because for the first time, they were the ones searching for words. "I didn't know any of this," Emily said finally. "About your work, about what you did." "I didn't think it mattered," I replied. "It does," Ryan said quickly. "It really does." I looked at him. His voice wasn't rushed now. It wasn't distracted. It was present. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" he asked. The question was honest, not accusing, just searching. I thought about it, about all those years, all those moments. "Because it was my job," I said simply. "And because you were my focus." They both went quiet at that. Emily's eyes dropped slightly. "I thought I was being too much," I added, "calling you, reaching out, trying to stay connected." "You weren't," she said immediately, but her voice wavered, because she knew. She knew that wasn't true. "Emily," I said gently, "you told me it was." She closed her eyes for a second. "I didn't mean it like that." "I know. I said, and I did." But that didn't change what it had done. Ryan shifted beside her. "We should have been there," he said quietly. "When you fell, when you called." I didn't answer right away, because this was the moment, the one I had imagined and dreaded, the moment where everything that had been left unsaid finally came to the surface. "I needed you," I said. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Not anger, not accusation, just truth. "And you weren't." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't realize. I didn't think." "I know," I said again, because I did. They hadn't meant to hurt me. They hadn't decided one day to push me away. It had just happened, slowly, quietly, until it became normal. But that didn't make it less real. "We got used to you always being there," Ryan said, his voice low. "No matter what." I looked at him. "Yes," I said. "I was." "And we stopped showing up the same way he finished." I nodded. That's what it felt like. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of things finally being seen. Emily reached for my hand again. "I don't want it to be like that anymore," she said. Ryan nodded. "Neither do I." I studied their faces, really studied them. Not as the children I had raised, not as the people who had hurt me, but as who they were now. Flawed, learning, trying. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Effort. Real effort. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, I said. They both looked at me surprised. Why not? Emily asked. Because I'm not the same person anymore, I replied. That landed. I could see it in their eyes. You've both built your lives, I continued, and I respect that. I always have. I took a breath. But I also need something different now. What Ryan asked. I paused, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted them to really hear it. I need to feel like I matter, I said. The words hung in the air between us, clear, uncomplicated. True? You do, Emily said quickly. I want to believe that, I said gently, but it has to show up in actions, not just words. Ryan nodded slowly. We can do that, he said. Then do it, I replied. Not harsh, not demanding, just firm, because this time I wasn't asking. I was setting a boundary, a quiet one, but a real one. Emily wiped her eyes. I don't want to lose you, she said. I reached out and touched her hand. You won't, because this time I wasn't asking. I was setting a boundary, a quiet one, but a real one. Emily wiped her eyes. I don't want to lose you, she said. I reached out and touched her hand. You won't, I said, but things have to change. She nodded. I understand. Ryan looked at me, his expression serious. Well, do better, he said. I held his gaze for a moment, then I nodded. I hope so. We stood there for a while longer, not speaking, just being. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like I was chasing them, or waiting for them, or hoping they would come back. Because now the distance had been named. The truth had been spoken. And whatever came next would be built differently. Not on habit, not on assumption, but on something more honest. Something that had been missing for a long time. Respect. And as we walked back toward the crowd, I realized something. This moment, this conversation, it mattered just as much as the one on the stage, because being seen by the world was powerful. But being seen by your own family, that was something else entirely. And for the first time, it felt like that might actually be possible again. The ride home felt quieter than the morning, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that mattered had already been said. Ryan insisted on driving. Emily sat in the front seat, turning back toward me every now and then, as if she still couldn't quite believe what had happened. And I sat in the back, looking out the window, watching the world pass by. But for once, I wasn't lost in it. I was present, fully, completely. So, Ryan said after a while, glancing at me through the rearview mirror, what happens now? It was a simple question, but it carried something deeper. Not just about the ceremony, about everything. I thought about it for a moment. I go home, I said softly. Emily turned slightly in her seat, and after that, I smiled faintly. After that, I keep living my life. The answer seemed to settle something in both of them. Not a final answer, but an honest one. When we pulled up to my house, Ryan got out first, walking around to open my door. It caught me off guard. Not because it was a grand gesture, but because it was thoughtful. Something small, but intentional. Careful, he said, offering his hand. I took it, and this time, I didn't feel like I was the one reaching first. Emily followed us up the walkway. We stood there for a moment, the three of us in front of the door. A place that had felt so quiet, so distant, for so long. "Can we come in?" she asked. I looked at her, then at Ryan, and I nodded. Yes. Inside the house felt different, not because anything had changed physically, but because the silence was no longer heavy. It was open. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had spent so many evenings alone. But now, it held something else. Presence, real presence. I've been thinking. It was open. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had spent so many evenings alone. But now it held something else. Presence. Real presence. "I've been thinking," Emily said carefully, her hands folded in her lap. "That's a good start," I replied gently. She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "I mean it," she said. "About everything. About how we've been, how I've been." Ryan nodded beside her. "Me too." I leaned back slightly in my chair. Listening, not interrupting, not guiding, just letting them speak. "I got so caught up in my own life," Emily continued. "Work deadlines, everything, and I kept telling myself I'd call you later, that there would always be time." She looked down for a moment. I didn't realize that later kept becoming not at all. Her words were honest, unpolished, and that made them real. Ryan rubbed his hands together, his voice quieter. "I thought you were okay," he said, "because you always sounded okay, even when you weren't." I nodded slowly. "I didn't want to burden you," I admitted. "That wasn't your job." He said quickly, "That was ours." Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. "I don't expect perfection," I said after a moment. They both looked at me. "I don't expect you to call every day, or show up every time something goes wrong." I paused. "But I do expect to matter." The words were simple, but they held everything. "You do," Emily said again, and this time it sounded different, less automatic. "More, but I do expect to matter." The words were simple, but they held everything. "You do," Emily said again, and this time it sounded different, less automatic, more intentional. "Then show me," I said. "Not harsh, not demanding, just clear." Ryan nodded. "We will." I believed him, not completely, not without hesitation, but enough to try. Emily stood up slowly. "Can I hug you?" she asked. The question surprised me, because once upon a time she wouldn't have asked. She would have just done it. But now she was giving me the choice, respecting the space, and that mattered more than the hug itself. I stood up, and I opened my arms. She stepped into them carefully, gently, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. But what she didn't realize was I wasn't fragile anymore. I held her, steady, present. And when she pulled away, Ryan stepped forward. "Guess it's my turn," he said with a small, awkward smile. I smiled back. "Yes, it is." His hug was different, stronger, more certain, but still careful. And in that moment, I felt something shift again. Not back to what we were, but forward, into something new. Something that had room for truth, for boundaries, for growth. Later, after they left, the house returned to its quiet state. But it didn't feel empty. I walked slowly through each room, the kitchen, the living room, the hallway. Each space held memories, but now they also held possibility. I stopped by the window, the same one I had stood at so many times before, looking out, waiting, hoping. But tonight, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't hoping. I was content, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. That being forgotten by some doesn't erase the impact you've had on others. That recognition doesn't always come from where you expect it, but when it does, it can change everything. And most importantly, that my worth was never dependent on who called me back, or who showed up, or who noticed. It was already there, always had been. I just hadn't allowed myself to see it. I turned away from the window, turned off the light, and walked toward my room, not as someone who had been overlooked, not as someone waiting to be remembered, but as someone who finally understood. She had never been invisible at all. There are moments in life that pass quietly, almost unnoticed, and yet they carry a weight far greater than we ever realize. We often believe that recognition defines value, that if no one sees what we do, then somehow it doesn't matter. But the truth is, the most meaningful actions are often the ones done without an audience. Jacqueline's story reminds us of something deeply important. Your worth is not measured by who calls you back, who shows up on time, or who applauds you. Your worth is built in the quiet choices you make every day, the kindness you give, the sacrifices you make, and the courage you show when no one is watching. Sometimes the people closest to us fail to see us clearly. Not because we are invisible, but because familiarity can blur appreciation. And when that happens, it hurts. It leaves a space that feels empty and unanswered. But that emptiness does not define your value. It only reveals where others have fallen short. What truly matters is this: the impact you have may travel further than you ever know. A single decision, a single moment of courage can ripple through years, through lives, through futures you may never witness. And one day, in ways you never expected, that truth may come back to find you. But even if it doesn't, it still matters. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all is this: love should not come at the cost of your dignity. You can forgive. You can open your heart again, but you can also set boundaries. You can choose to be seen, to be respected, and to no longer shrink yourself just to keep others comfortable. If this story touched you in any way, I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever felt overlooked by the people you love? What moment in your life made you realize your true worth? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe in stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of our value, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this waiting for you. You are not invisible. You never were.